Refuge and Bodhicitta, we've covered refuge, and now we venture more deeply into Karma Chagmé, which is very dense synopsis of Bodhicitta. So I think we left off, unless I'm mistaken, on the last line in larger font. So here it is necessary to strive to generate the Mahayana aspiration. Am I correct? I think that's it. Yeah. So we pick up on the top of page 27 in the larger font. Excuse me. Sorry. So regarding the generation of the Mahayana aspiration, there are divisions in terms of its essence, its characteristics, its causes and conditions, and its numerous levels. So it's good to bring a rich understanding to this and not just have it as a soundbite, a liturgy, just something to recite periodically. This brings richness to it, a theoretical texture, and a broader context for the cultivation and practice of bodhicitta. So first there is the division between the Mahayana relative, and I'm just going to use my current translation. I'm just going back to the Sanskrit. So first there's the division between the Mahayana relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. The Sutra on Unraveling the Enlightened View, Tibetan terms of Gongpa, much better translated as enlightened view, states there are two types, there are two kinds of bodhicitta, the ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Okay, good. So what are they? The characteristic of the Mahayana relative bodhicitta is an awareness focused on achieving perfect enlightenment for the sake of others. Just to elaborate very, very briefly here, and that is there's a very clear causal sequence here in terms of how does it arise. And it arises from outwards to inwards. What doesn't happen, which easily we can fall into this, it's not something terrible, but it's just different, is reflecting on the qualities of perfect enlightenment, of Buddhahood, and then thinking, boy, I would like that, that would be fantastic, I'd really like that. Yeah, I want to achieve that, and oh yeah, everybody else, I hope that helps. I hope that helps, That's not it. That's not it. It's actually looking outwards. It's assuming, frankly, that there is already some basis in this very authentic and profound Shravakayana. It's not there, it's just something to ridicule. That's absurd. It's already rooted in an awareness of suffering, one's own suffering, the suffering of others, rooted in an awareness of what are the causes of suffering, what is the path, and so forth. The stronger your rootedness in the Shravakayana, of really with insight, the Four Noble Truths and so on, then the stronger can be, when it goes into full flowering, can be your Mahayana aspiration of bodhicitta. And so the actual generation of bodhicitta occurs first by looking outwards. And that's where most of reality is, after all. And just seeing just how much suffering there is in the world, not only oneself, of course, but one has fathomed that. It really assumes you've got some deep insight into the First Noble Truth and the Second Noble Truth. And then you go like supernova, that is, you expand that, and it's just kind of like this overwhelming sense of now the magnitude of suffering is so much more than my own. And seeing that it's not hopeless, that every sentient being does have Buddha nature. And then thinking, how could I be of greatest benefit? Even with no Dharma at all, if I didn't do anything more, I can still be of some benefit. I think we should start there. And not think, I can't do anything, but if I become a really good Buddhist, then I can do something. We already can. We can give directions to a person who's lost. We can pick somebody up. If a child falls down, we can help. There's something we can do. Hedonically, at least. We're already not incompetent. Incapable. And then the question comes, how could I become more effective in alleviating the suffering of others? And more, and then we just shoot right to the top. Oh, I could be of greatest possible benefit if I was completely awakened. Then I better do that. I better do that. Because this is the meaning of life. This is what it's all about. And so therefore, but the highlight is in order to be of benefit to sentient beings, now through a process of elimination, there could a lot of other good things, become a doctor, an accountant, a farmer, a midwife, and so forth, and these are all good. But when you look at all of them, becoming a bodhisattva, becoming an arhat, there's just still something that's on top of the on top of everything else, and that's become a Buddha. And so that's where that aspiration comes from. So, very simply put, as he says, it's an awareness focused on achieving perfect enlightenment for the sake of others, the ornament for higher realization, the Abhisamaya states that the generated aspiration is for genuine, perfect enlightenment for the sake of others. So there it is, quite definitive. Many causes and conditions are taught, but in brief, they are faith in the Jinas and Jinaputras, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the conquerors and the conquerors' children, Bodhisattvas, and that is having the confidence, the faith. These are not just fictions, they're not just stories or blind faith or whatever. These are actual beings who have been in this world and have been tremendous blessing to the world. And having faith in that, confidence in that, inspired appreciation for that. So there's one that's becoming a Bodhisattva, becoming a Buddha, actually is a possibility because it's already been done. And so having faith in that, right? Otherwise bodhicitta would never arise. And then having a compassionate mind, that would be really Mahakaruna, would be the one that would be the immediate catalyst. And then, interesting, this isn't very predictable when you say that cause. You don't know quite what's coming unless you're already a very good scholar. But the first one makes really good sense. Having faith in the Bodhisattva way of life, and in those who followed that path, and those who come to the culmination of the path, and then be inspired to follow that path out of compassion, and not just for your own sake. But then the third one's interesting, and of course it's so practical. And the third cause and condition is being cared for by a spiritual friend. It's going to be hard to do this by reading books, even really good books. And so coming under the compassionate care, the guidance of a spiritual friend, a Kalyana Mitra, a guru, and so forth, then that will pretty well do it. That will be enough. Because that spiritual friend, or friends of course, can guide you from step to step along the path all the way to its culmination. It is said, its root is asserted to be compassion, which entails the constant thought to be of benefit. And then the Jewel Meteor Spell Sutra states, by having faith in the Jina and the Dharma of the Jina, faith in the way of life of the Bodhisattvas, and faith in supreme enlightenment, the mind of supreme beings arises. It's quite clear. And then we go a little bit technical. I'm not going to go hyper-technical here, but this is interesting. And when I first learned about it, I was actually quite inspired. And that is there are 22 divisions. Okay, now you learn about this in the Abhisamaya, which is very extensively, very widely studied by especially monastic scholars in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism, especially the Gelugpa, but others as well, for sure. And so there are 22 divisions ranging from the earth-like bodhicitta to the cloud-like bodhicitta. So you can check out the endnote at your leisure, endnote 29. But these are mapping or placing a grid of these sequential stages of evolution or development of bodhicitta from deeper and deeper and deeper levels from the beginning of the Mahayana path of accumulation all the way up to its culmination in 21 phases, and those 22 phases are mapped onto the 5 paths. Path of accumulation, of preparation, path of seeing, path of training, or meditation, and then the path of no more training. And so there are 22. It starts with earth-like bodhicitta, ends with cloud-like bodhicitta. And again, the ornament for higher realization states, earth, gold, moon, there are 22, ... there are 22 kinds. So it was Geshe Ngawang that first introduced me to this when he was teaching this text in the library back in about 1973. It was 73. And this is my first introduction to the 5 paths. And the way he taught it, because here's a man who's just embodying what he teaches. Those of you, at least there's one person here who knows, you look, where's the difference between how he manifests in the world and what he's teaching? And I couldn't see any difference. It was just there, and it had been there for a long time. I did not translate, but I edited the first teachings on Lama back in 71. And it became a book that's come through like seven editions by now. The Tibetan tradition of mental development, that's what they called it. And then when it was all done, then someone, maybe I think it was the director of the library, Gyatso Tering, said, Alan, it'd be nice to have a little biography of Geshe Ngawang at the beginning. Would you be willing to write that up? I said, sure. So I sat down with him and he told me his life story, condensed version. And on that occasion, I think this is not irrelevant. Because this is not just a bunch of scholars talking about books. So here was Geshe Tengki. And I've really never met a teacher who embodies greater enthusiasm and love for Dharma than he did. And I've met a lot of really wonderful teachers. But it was like he was just in love with the Dharma. And joy was there, And I knew him for years. Translated for him on a number of occasions. He was telling me his life story. He fled Tibet when they were just fleeing for their lives. And he had two of his close disciples with him. And they headed north, as I recall. No, they headed south. And then they found the way was blocked because there were soldiers that would machine gun them down. And so they had to flee north, just trying to get around them. And then they fled north, just the opposite direction they wanted to go, just to get away from, the firing squad. And then eventually they circled around and came south again. And then at night they found themselves surrounded by machine guns, the PLA, People's Liberation Army. And so it looked like, and by this time, Geshe Tengki was a natural leader. Some people just have that, and he did. And so at this time, I think there was something like maybe 800 monks, lay people that just gathered around somebody in a time of complete panic and despair and terror. And they're just looking to somehow get away from this hell realm that Tibet had been turned into. And so he was surrounded by hundreds of people. And so it was at night, and there were many men with them, and a lot of these are Kampas. They're armed. They're not just going to lie down and let their families be shot. So a firefight broke out. Not by the monks, by and large, they were not fighting, but so was Geshe Tengki was in the midst of all of that. And he saw what was happening, so he called his two close disciples to him. And he told me, and he said, he just called them to me, and he said, all right, because this is no way, they're not going to be shooting anybody, they're monks. And so he said, okay, and he just called them together, and he said, okay, we're about to die. So just before you die, I want you to be focusing on the Chinese, and just focus on them with compassion. And let that be your last thought. Okay. No separation between the teacher and his teaching. They escaped, and I was one of the many beneficiaries of his having escaped and being able to turn the wheel of Dharma. So he taught this. He taught these 22 stages, but what caught my attention, and has caught my attention ever since, is 22 stages. I basically didn't think about any of them beyond about the first two, because the other ones are so over the horizon. It's like kind of looking up at Mount Everest, and my neck will only go up to about 100 meters above my head, and beyond that I can't even see anything. It's so theoretical, so abstract, that I can't frankly even imagine it. But the beginning ones, the base of the mountain, earth-like bodhicitta, earth-like bodhicitta, gold-like bodhicitta, I got really interested in that, because that's down at the base of the mountain. And so I was really interested in that, and wanted to know, okay, how do you get that? How do you get like earth-like bodhicitta? It's called earth-like because it supports all of the other stages of development. Okay, it's the earth. And then it's called gold-like, the second one, because you can do all kinds of things with gold, but one thing you can't do is make it become non-gold. In terms of old alchemy, I mean, maybe you can drop an atom bomb on it, maybe, but back then, no. If it's gold, it stays gold. And the point of that is that the second phase of bodhicitta, the gold-like bodhicitta, never reverts. You'll never lose it. From now until you're Buddha, whether that's one lifetime or 3 countless eons, you're going to have gold-like bodhicitta forever. That's pretty cool. That caught my attention. That really caught my attention. So I was very keen to learn, well, how do you develop earth-like bodhicitta? Where's the first step? If I can get to the first step, the second step, then all the other ones I can be considered about later, but I'm not going to be worrying about them if I can't even find the first step. And he made it totally clear. Sure, you develop the first step. You get to that goal-like bodhicitta by cultivating bodhicitta in whatever way that works, because there are many ways of cultivating it. And you cultivate it until it becomes spontaneous, until it just starts running. Here's maybe a really crude analogy, but it's good enough for me. And that is, you get into a car, and you remember the cars when they had keys, you turn the ignition? Remember those? Well, you have a kind of an old car, maybe it's cold winter day, and you turn it, it goes, and then it goes, that's bodhicitta. Where you don't keep on needing to crank it and crank it and crank it. You've cranked it enough that then it catches, and then it goes with, and then stop cranking the key, then just, then you're ready to go. But it's now uncontrived motor turning over, and you don't need to keep on pushing it and cranking it and so forth. And so, that's not bad, not bad. And so, how do you develop that? Well, you develop that, but of course, in order to get the mind to the point that it really can be turning over, and the wheel of Dharma, Bodhicitta, can be turning over and self-perpetuating, then he added quite early on, it was in his tradition of Serache monastic college, that to develop bodhicitta to that extent, then you have to have shamatha. You have to have really quite a well-tuned mind, a very well-tuned mind, free of the five obscurations, a really healthy mind, as a basis for developing a sublime mind. They call it the jewel mind, the jewel of minds. Well, you have to have a really healthy mind. You can't. It'd be hard to see how you could go from straight neurosis to bodhicitta. You know, there's something, a buffer zone in between, and that would be shamatha. But then the gold-like, that's the one I was really interested in, because the first one, the earth-like, Geshe Taike told us that this is like 1973. So, what is that? 42 years ago, 43 years ago. He said the first one, if that's all you've achieved, you become a bodhisattva. You're now a bodhisattva, right? Great. But you could become an un-bodhisattva. You could fall back. You could lose your bodhicitta. It could happen. And we've seen things in human history where the villainy of human beings against human beings is so inconceivable that your mind just goes into meltdown. And I don't need to give an example. We have many. Unfortunately, we have many. Where you just wonder, how is it even conceivable that we can do that to each other? How could we? How could? And if one encountered that kind of up close and personal, one might think, I think there's no hope. There's no hope for you. No hope. You have no interest in Dharma. You're adamantly fixated on anti-Dharma. It's like a doctor saying, this patient's hopeless. I can't give any treatment. There's nothing I can do. And it's not because I'm incapable. No, the Dharma is very capable. But this is an incurable patient. And they say, well, then I won't give you any more treatment. At least I give treatment to myself. I know one person here really wants to practice Dharma. And then you can fall back into, okay then. Sorry world, but you're just not ready for Dharma, and I know one person who is, and I'm going to follow, and I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. And it could happen. And so then you could be bodhisattva, and then an un-bodhisattva. It could happen. So what needs to be done? How could you so fortify? There's a nice word. Or another word is seal. How can you seal your bodhicitta? Fortify it. So that no matter what happens, no matter what evil you perceive, you encounter and so forth, you'll never lose heart. You'll never fall back. And it's actually, the answer makes really good sense to me. This jewel heart, this jewel mind of bodhicitta needs the armor of wisdom. It needs the protection of wisdom. Insight, deep insight into core truths of reality, such as, just for starters, it's a really good start, insight into impermanence, into dukkha, and non-self. And the final one also it's the final one, that non-self issue. It's about personal identitylessness, personal, not necessarily the emptiness of all phenomena. That's bigger, but this is a good place to start. But if you perceive a villain, an individual, a group, whoever they are, we don't need to give an example. We have so many to choose from. But you see a real villain where there's just such profound evil there that it almost makes you pass out. Then you look through that and you see it's not the person, it's the mental affliction. It's not the person who is evil. Not from the core, not from the side of the individual. You can give any name you like, but it is not that person from his or her own side who is evil. It is that person massively dominated by mental afflictions that makes this person's mind evil, this person's behavior evil, and so forth. But there is no person who is evil at the core. Doesn't matter what they've done. There is no such person. And so the identitylessness of evil people, that they are not evil in their core, they are temporarily, massively under the domination of delusion, craving, hostility, maybe a myriad of other mental afflictions. But they are the first victims. They are the first victims. They are the first victims of all the harm they bring to the world. And then, rather than giving up, then you just feel these people are the most worthy of compassion. They're the first victims. And if they're bringing massive evil into the world, what's going to be the karma of that for them? Other people they kill, they just kill them once. Whether it's machine guns, whether it's gas chambers, whether it's torching people, whether it's poisoning them, whether nuking them and so forth. You kill other people, you only kill them once. Only once. Whereas the karma from that, almost defies the imagination. So who's going to suffer more? The person who perpetrated that suffering, or those who are recipients? The recipients, you get it once, you get it in the teeth, you're dead, you're finished. They can't touch you anymore. You're off in the bardo, they can't find you. You're off. You're free now. You're off. You're off the hook of whatever individual or regime or government or institution it is that's perpetrating such evil. But the person is never off the hook as a person who perpetrated it. And so it's just more compassion. So even when you encounter the most staggering evil in the world, it just is more fuel for your compassion, which means now your bodhicitta is irreversible. If you see goodness, it just makes you happy and your bodhicitta just blazes up. You see samsara, it blazes up. You see evil, it blazes up. It just kind of blazes. It's nurtured by everything. The whole of samsara supports and nurtures your bodhicitta. Well, then you're on cruise control. That is, it's going to continue. You will not fall back now. But it needs wisdom for that. And then you ask, which wisdom? And in fact, it's right there. The 4 applications of mindfulness. That's it. Cultivate bodhicitta, and then if you want to stabilize it, fortify it, give it the armor, give it the protection of never falls back, you need shamatha to make it that level of bodhicitta, and you need the 4 applications of mindfulness to stabilize it to the point of irreversibility and achieve the medium stage of the Mahayana path of accumulation. So I heard that, and I said, okay, I've got my agenda. I have my marching orders. Shamatha, and everything that's needed to cultivate and to realize shamatha. Bodhicitta itself, the crown jewel, and then the 4 applications of mindfulness to fortify it. I figure, okay, that's enough for now. That's what I thought. That's enough, and that'll keep me busy for a while. And then all the other teachings, and we are exposed to many, Yamataka, Vajrayogini, Vajrasattva, eventually 6 yogas of Naropa, and Kala Chakra, and yeah, but where are all of those if you don't have shamatha, you don't have bodhicitta, and you don't even have basic insight? Where are those? They're clouds. I just don't see how any of those constitute a path. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And I'm not, I think, the old-timers like, I'm not denigrating anything here. I'm not putting down anything. As the old saying in Tibetan goes, there are many profound practices, but not many profound practitioners. Anybody can get an empowerment. Go to the right place at the right time, pay your fee, or pay no fee. You can get the empowerments. Guya Samaja, Kala Chakra, He Vajra, and so forth and so on. That's not hard. You can get teachings. That's not hard. They're there. These lamas are so generous. But are you a capable practitioner that can actually take those practices and turn them into a path? No shamatha, no bodhicitta, no insight. 3 retreat, knock yourself out. Do 2 or 3 in your 3 retreats, but if you don't have shamatha, genuine bodhicitta and realization of emptiness, what's the point of doing them again and again and again? I don't really get it. It's not that I don't get doing 3 retreats. But is the basis there? Is the basis there? Have you put in the time to really develop the shamatha and really cultivate bodhicitta that is not a liturgy, and really meditate deeply to cultivate insight, these foundational insight into the reality where we live? If that's there, then fantastic. Only rejoicing. If it's not, it looks like we're being swept away by the inertia of tradition. And what gets lost in the shuffle is the very notion of the path, and that's what he's highlighting here. This is the path. So earth, gold, moon. Moon corresponds to the great stage of the Mahayana path of accumulation, and this is the crescent moon. the crescent moon that you know it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, fuller and fuller. So there it is, and that's just the first three. I look at this, that's enough for me. The first three, Mahayana path of accumulation. Okay, that one. Preparation, my understanding is vague. Understanding of path of seeing, vaguer. Path of meditation, really vague. Enlightenment, a little bit of understanding, conceptual. So alternatively, there are three kinds of the bodhicitta, of conducting oneself with appreciation. The first one, it's moha in Tibetan. Appreciation is a very close translation. The bodhicitta of pure extraordinary resolve. This is the laksam, the extraordinary resolve to free all sentient beings from suffering and to bring each one to a state of liberation. That's the extraordinary resolve. It's a technical term, laksam. And then the bodhicitta of maturation or fruition, of maturation. It has to be nambar mimba in Tibetan, must be, which eliminate obscuration. So these three modes eliminate obscurations. Again, the ornament for sutras, the Sutra Alamkara states, three levels of the generated aspiration are asserted. Appreciation, the pure extraordinary resolve, and the maturation, they eliminate obscurations. And so then among the 22 divisions discussed in the ornament for higher realization, the earth-like, gold-like, and moon-like bodhicitta are the states for us beginners. That's Mahayana path of accumulation. I so like that this text and the preceding one, especially, these are completely practice texts. These are not study texts that people sit down, monastic colleges and they study the great treatises. This isn't one of the great treatises. This is a meditation manual. Right? And I love that in the midst of a meditation manual, he's citing these great treatises, the great classics. These are classics that he's citing. But he's citing them not for egghead scholars, but for people who are really intent on practice. I'm an egghead scholar, by the way, so I'm not deprecating such people. I understand them, I'm one of them. So the ornament for higher realization states that the three mentioned types of bodhicitta are brought forth by appreciation, and they occur at the stage of beginners. Beginners within the 5 paths, path of accumulation, and read at your leisure. Gyaltsen Rinpoche is very helpful glossing or clarification of appreciation, that one proceeds in these early phases of bodhicitta, not simply out of blind faith or belief or, conformity and so forth. But on the contrary, as you're cultivating bodhicitta, you see through your own experience the benefits of cultivating the sublime mind. And that appreciation through your own experience inspires you, motivates you further. And that's what carries you through. So the word appreciation is very rich, and it entails insight, understanding through your own experience. We continue a little bit more. This just inspired me no end when I first learned about it, and it hasn't stopped. So we have a couple of more classics. This is really classic. This is Indian Mahayana Buddhism. So we have these different modes of bodhicitta. The shepherd-like, and we'll see the other two, they're coming right up. So the best bodhicitta is shepherd-like bodhicitta, with which one resolved not to attain enlightenment until oneself, not to achieve one's own enlightenment, one's own perfect Buddhahood, until all sentient beings have been brought to that state. So imagine that. With this, the Buddhist worldview was actually no smaller than the view of modern cosmology, where, just to run some numbers, we are one planet within the Milky Way, which has on the order of about 400 billion stars, 300, 400, 500 billion, in that ballpark. We have one star out of, let's take the average, 400 billion. That's one galaxy. And there are roughly 100 billion. We have one star out of, let's take the average, 400 billion. That's one galaxy. And there are roughly 100 billion galaxies. They estimate 100 billion galaxies. They estimate 100 billion galaxies. That's a pretty big world, right? Pretty large. And scientists, now that they've discovered exoplanets, planets around other stars, they're estimating, these are informed guesses, that there's probably on the average about one planet for every star, with roughly 100 billion to a trillion stars per galaxy. Right? 100 billion, small galaxy, a trillion, big galaxy. We're somewhere in between. Mediocre as usual. that for these, okay, so it's 100 billion times 100 billion to a trillion. That's how many stars. Okay, that's a lot of zeros. It probably winds up being an awful lot of sentient beings. The chances are, they're guessing there in modern cosmology, and the Buddhism says, yeah, you're right. I mean, these are good numbers to knock around, and yes, a lot of those planets are inhabited. And so when they say all sentient beings, they actually mean all of them, and not just on our planet, our galaxy, and so forth. They actually mean all of them. So this kind of just makes your mind like somebody put a hand grenade inside your head and just blows your mind all over the place. Like, are you kidding me? And here it is. I mean, this is the noblest, the most awesome bodhicitta, to look out on the world of all sentient beings and to do so with the mind-boggling, it's kind of, the Tibetan word is semshuk, the power of your heart. The power of your heart, the strength of your heart, semshuk. To say, I care so much about all of the sentient beings that I'll see that every single one of them is brought to enlightenment before I step over and achieve perfect enlightenment. And it's called shepherd-like, for a very good reason. And that is the Good Shepherd. We have this coming up in Christianity, the Good Shepherd in Buddhism. The Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd at the end of the day, bringing the flock back to the fold, getting them all bedded down, protected. And then once the flock is all bedded down, then the shepherd goes in and eats his porridge, or whatever he gets for dinner. But he takes care of the flock first. And if there's any stragglers, he goes out and gets them. And only when all of the flock are taken care of, then he goes in and says, okay, now I've done what I needed to do, and now I can go in and have my dinner. That's classic, it's like in a parable. And that's the vision here, and they say this is the bodhicitta of Avalokiteshvara. That's the most noble. Then we have the helmsman, the second one, the helmsman-like bodhicitta. The helmsman, the navigator. The metaphor here is very transparent again. If this is setting out on a voyage in which the passengers are all sentient beings, and the bodhisattva is the helmsman, the navigator. And it's the navigator's job to get them all across the ocean of samsara to the further shore, to liberation, to awakening. But of course, they're all going to get there at the same time. The navigator doesn't come afterwards. He doesn't jump, that would be silly. But nor does he jump overboard and try to swim faster than the ship. That would be also silly. They all get there together. So that's the second type of bodhicitta. The helmsman-like bodhicitta is middling, and with it one resolves to attain Buddhahood or spiritual awakening oneself together with all sentient beings. Let's all go together. I'll bring it all over together. And then the least is the king-like bodhicitta. And this occurs when you consider, since all sentient beings without exception have been my mother and father, they're all kin, they're all family, I must fulfill their needs, but I cannot do so now. I mean, I'm so limited, I'm so limited. Therefore, I must, in order to take care of all my family, then I have to transcend my current limitations. And therefore I resolve first to attain Buddhahood myself, then without needing to apply effort. Once you've achieved enlightenment, then all your activities are effortless, spontaneous. Then without needing to apply effort, I shall serve the needs of all sentient beings by means of effortless, spontaneous, enlightened activities until samsara is empty. So those are the three types of bodhicitta. And he said, this is important. So I had learned about that a long time ago. Never forgot it, actually. Many things, most of the stuff, John, I learned I forgot. Can't remember it anymore. There was too much. But this one I've never forgotten. Everything you just read, it never happened. I've never forgotten that. It's like 43 years earlier. Never forgotten this one. The three modes of bodhicitta. It's interesting that he calls this is the best, this is the medium, this is the inferior. I think he's speaking to us beginners as he speaks as if he's one of us beginners, just setting out on the path, Karma Chagmé. For us beginners, we have this powerfully ingrained tendency of me first. It's called self-centeredness. Self-centeredness. The sense that, well, if there's something good out there, let me have it. I'll get there first. Me first, basically, it's me first. Everybody else second. And it happens in business, it happens in education, it happens in science. There's grant money out there. Who's going to get it? Look out. We're coming for it. you know? It's competitive, fiercely competitive. And it's pretty much everywhere. In sports, in business, in football, I mean, it's everywhere, you know. Me first, me first, me first. One country, me first. We have the greatest country. We have the best country. Me first. We're showing how great we are because we're pushing everybody else aside, that we can get all the good stuff first. And so it's not East or West, it's not religious, not religious, and it happens in religion as well. We've seen it throughout all of history. That's why religion has such a bad reputation. People doing the most grotesque things in nature religion because they're sure their religion is best. You know? And so it's everywhere. It's such a deep, and it manifests everywhere. I mean, there's just no walk of life where it doesn't crop up because it's such a deeply ingrained tendency. And so when we come to Mahayana and we hear about perfect enlightenment, then the first thought is bound to be, me first. I want to get it. Look out. Okay, give me the fastest teaching. Give me the Rolls Royce. What is it? Dzogchen? Kala Chakra? Guya Samaja? What is it? What's the highest? 6 yogas? I want those now. Make it snappy. How much do I have to pay? How many 3-year retreats do I need to do? Come on, how much? And what's the best Lama? What's the best Lama? I want the best one. You know, it's natural. It's natural. I'm not speaking sarcastically. It's very natural. But of course, it's completely antithetical to the whole Bodhisattva way of life, which is just the opposite, where we cherish all other sentient beings more than ourselves. And so he's saying the best one for us beginners is to so completely torpedo the sense of me first that we're saying everybody else first. That's pretty drastic. Everybody else first. And that is, I will bring everybody else to enlightenment. And when everybody is taken care of, everybody's brought to perfect enlightenment, then I'll step over the threshold. That's really a massive head-on collision to self-centeredness. If one can rise to that, that's pretty awesome. But of course, wisdom has to come into play. And here's how it does, and that is this way I was taught it when I was first introduced to this. But then when you consider, imagine you actually bring forth that aspiration, you're willing to postpone your enlightenment until all sentient beings are Buddhas. That's awesome. But then you consider, is that practical? And that is, I'm saying I want to lead people from the first Bodhisattva Bhumi to the second Bodhisattva Bhumi, and to the 10th Bodhisattva Bhumi. But I'm going to get them all there without having achieved that myself. I'm going to get them to the 10th Bodhisattva Buddha and to Buddhahood without having been there myself. How does that work out exactly? And maybe it's a good heart, but maybe that's not so practical. Maybe, at the very least, I could take one step back and say, well, let's all get there together. That means I'm really still willing to postpone my own enlightenment for all those terrible evildoers in the world and so forth and so on. I'm going to bring us all. I'm not leaving anybody behind. But so no child, no sentient being left behind. But we'll all get there together. But I'll be there with you, because otherwise, how can you be really a guide? If you're like a wagon train in the Old West. How can you lead a caravan of wagons across to the Pacific Ocean if you're not in the wagon train? If you just send them on ahead, not a very practical strategy. The wagon master is with them, right? All the way to the Pacific coast, along the Oregon Trail and so on. And so this is actually more practical. Be in the wagon train, be on the ship, and be there every step of the way. That's more practical. But then, as we see in this king-like bodhicitta, but really, how practical is that? After all, when you achieve Buddhahood, it's not like infinite retirement. It's not like you put back your peels and say, "Oh, it's nice to be a Buddha," and never do anything anymore. You know? It's kind of like now you have a whole new job description. You have to be a Buddha forever because there's nothing else to be. But the very nature of Buddhahood is not just resting in Dharmakaya; it's manifesting inconceivably and limitlessly as Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. And that is, in fact, the most effective way to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment. Because with your wisdom, you see what each individual sentient being needs, and you have the full compassion and the full power of your Buddha mind. Implement that. So in terms of sheer practicality, it actually makes a lot more sense. Not out of selfishness, but out of the sheer principle of efficiency or efficacy. It would actually be most effective, most compassionate to get there yourself. It's like there being a plague a plague. When I read Camus' Plague a long time ago, it kind of made an impression on me, because it really struck me like the whole world has a plague of delusion, craving, hostility. And if you yourself have the plague, and everybody around you has the plague, and you feel this enormous compassion for all of them, maybe the best thing to do would be to heal yourself first, and know how you did it, and then go out and heal every single one. But not try to heal them while you're completely, blasted by the plague yourself. So that's where those three come. I think it gives rise to very, very rich food for thought. And that's a good place to pause. But the three types of bodhicitta, I don't know what impression this made on your mind, but I know when I first learned about it, and these early stages of bodhicitta, I know it's made a lasting impression, because I remember this like I was taught yesterday. It's very powerful. So let's just pause. And at the end of the day, which we aren't there yet, but when the end of the day comes, and it comes time for dedicating merit, to dedicate the merit of your day's activities, in which you can rejoice at your leisure. By the time to dedicate, it'd be very good to dedicate to the cultivation of such bodhicitta where it's not arisen, and that it may develop and develop and develop where it has arisen, all the way through the 22. They say it's like putting an investment, like investing. You have something good here, something called merit, goodness, spiritual energy. Call it whatever you like. It's punya in Sanskrit. But you have something really good, some kind of capital, something you can use in various ways. They can give you rise to all kinds of good things. But it's like placing that capital in a vault where it will never be stolen, it will never vanish, it will never erode or fall away. And it said by dedicating your bodhicitta, dedicating your merit to bodhicitta, to enlightenment of all sentient beings, that protects it. It'll be there. It's your deep investment, and it'll be there until you're enlightened. Sounds like a good idea. So enjoy your evening.